Hello, I'm Teresa. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for joining me today if you're new. And if you're a regular, thank you for coming back again. Today I'm going to be printing, but I'm also going to be doing a bit of sewing, and rather topically for the moment, I am going to be gel printing onto fabric to create a nice design that we can then convert into a face covering mask, which a lot of countries at the moment, we are expected to wear these masks while we're out in public or in shops and stores, public transport, places like that. And I just thought it would be nice to show you how easy it is to print onto fabric and just create unique designs, and then just go through some simple instructions on how to create this fitted mask. All the information for the pattern and everything will be in the description below. But just, if you're not interested in making the mask, still take a look at the printing on the fabric, because of course you can create whatever you want with your printed fabric. I just thought it would be nice to combine these two projects today. So I'm going to move this out of the way and get set up for the printing, and I'll be back to show you how I created it. I'm going to begin with a quick rundown of the items that I'm using today. First off, obviously the jelly plate. I'm using my 8 by 10 inch Gelly Arts gel plate. It's perfect size for the pattern pieces that I'm using. I'm using a Speedball brayer. I normally use the Ranger hard rubber brayer, but I've been gifted this Speedball one. I'm going to give it a whirl, see if I like that any better. The paints that I'm using today are actually fabric paints. So I have a blue, an aquamarine and a gold. They're metallic fabric paints from Colourcraft. Now you can use any brand that you want, it really doesn't matter. If you don't have fabric paints, get yourself some fabric painting mediums, such as this one by DecoArt Americana, and mix it with your standard acrylic paints and they will work absolutely fine. Now I'll pop a link up in the corner to a project I did on a cushion cover where I used this with normal acrylic paints. Just, follow the instructions on the back for mixing ratios and you will be absolutely fine. Now, I've got a couple of things for making some patterns. I've got this sequin waist, this large sequin waist, which gives these big circles. I've got a piece of paper here I'm going to cut into random strips so that I can create some stripes. And obviously I've got my fabric. I'm using a coloured fabric today, this turquoise colour, which coordinates nicely with the paints that I'm using. You could use a white fabric, it really doesn't matter, but I don't want any white showing. I want there to be a base colour, so that's why I thought I'd choose this. Now this is 100% cotton fabric. It is pre-washed and dried, so that, if there's any shrinkage, that's already occurred. And the pattern that I'm using today is one that I found here on YouTube. I googled face masks and Sweet Red Poppy came up. Her channel has some really nice designs for masks. I like this fitted mask, and in the description to her video it links to her website where you can download and print off this pattern piece. I like the fact that it's fitted. I like the fact it's available in different sizes. I've made a couple of modifications. I haven't followed her instructions exactly. For instance, I do add in a wire at the top to help shape around the nose, and instead of putting ties on, I've created a channel at the edge and put elastic loops on, but that's just my personal preference. So if you like the style of this mask, please do just check out Sweet Red Poppy here on YouTube and look through the patterns that she's got. Her instructions are really clear and simple and easy to follow. So I'm not going to be going into great detail about the making of this. I will show you a little bit sort of step by step, but I'm going to leave it to her. If you want to make this, her tutorial's absolutely fabulous. Obviously, you're going to need something to sew with. I'm using a sewing machine. You could do this by hand with a needle and thread. You're going to need fabric scissors. You're going to need some pins, things like that. But that's about it, really. So to begin with, obviously the pattern piece here, we cut 4 pieces. You use 2 pieces for the outside and 2 pieces for the lining. Now I am not going to be printing on the lining, the bit that goes next to my face. I'm just going to leave that as plain fabric. But obviously I need 2 pattern pieces printed. Now looking at the size of the pattern piece, looking at the size of my gel plate, I'm just going to cut myself 2 squares that will fit onto my plate, print it, and then once that's ironed and dried and everything, I can cut out the pattern pieces. So for my first layer, I'm going to begin by using the blue paint, and I'm just going to see if I can just pour a little bit out onto my plate. and then use the brayer to create a nice even coat. I'm hoping to have quite a nice subtle pattern when I've finished, because this is something that, you know, I'm going to be wearing, and I don't want it to be too loud. I'm looking for something that's quite nice and harmonious, shall we say. So I've cut my piece of paper into some just random strips. As I say, I thought we'll create some nice simple designs, and this would be a great way just to do some wavy stripes. And I'm just going to mask off using these cut paper pieces. I'm going to take one of my fabric pieces, pop that down, and then I've got a scrap more of this paper, just going to press down firmly to transfer that paint onto the fabric piece. And there we've got our first layer. Now I'm going to repeat this with my second piece. And there's our other piece with our first layer done. Once again, just carefully remove these strips. I've got just an old clean up piece of paper here. I'm just going to try and remove as much of this blue paint as I can, because then I need to clean the plate to put my next colour on. So just transferred a bit of that onto there. Quick squirt of water, and we'll clean this plate off, ready to use the green, the aquamarine colour. So we're going to create the second layer in exactly the same way. Carefully brayer a nice even coat of the aquamarine over the plate. Then arrange the paper strips once again. Now at this point you can choose, do you want to print in the opposite direction and create a sort of plaid effect? I want to keep my stripes going vaguely in the same direction, but I want to try and line up so that the paint goes where the paint wasn't in the first layer, if you sort of understand. So it's not going to be an exact science, but I'm hoping that my stripes will be a bit offset. And indeed they are. I hope you can see that. It's quite a subtle colouring. I'm wondering, will it... a little bit more obvious there if I put the paper behind. But yeah, I've got a nice sort of offset effect. So as before, we'll repeat that on the second pattern piece. And there's our second pattern piece. And finally, I'm going to use the gold paint and I'm going to create some dots using that sequin waste. Just need a little bit more paint. I'm going to put down my 2 pieces of sequin waste. Pop down my piece of fabric and press firmly through that piece of paper. And that's given us some nice sort of subtle dot pattern on the top. Just going to add a bit more paint. And there's our second piece. So I'm going to clean this away now. And then we can get ready to actually construct the mask. Really, really shimmery, these fabric paints. Shows up very well on the paper. Because it's such a thin layer on the fabric, they're not, they don't look as metallic. But there is a little bit of a shimmer when it catches the light. Once the fabric paint is dry, and it really doesn't take very long at all, I followed the instructions, which was to press it on the reverse side with a hot iron, and that heat sets it and allows this to be washable. And it's pretty much the same instructions for most fabric paints and fabric mediums. So just follow whatever it says on what you're using. So I've taken my pattern piece here and I've cut 2 pieces from my printed fabric here, and then 2 pieces just from the plain fabric here, which will be the lining. And it's time really to begin the construction. Now, popping the right sides together, I'm going to stitch along this curved seam here, just using a straight stitch. I'm going to do that both on this printed fabric and on the lining fabric. Next thing to do is just clip this seam so that it folds smoothly. So once you've clipped some little notches out of your seams, you want to pop over to the ironing board and just press it all nicely out so you get a smooth curve. do that for both pieces. And once it's pressed, you should have something that looks a lot like that, with a nice smooth curve round this seam. Next thing we need to do is sew the outer and the inner together. So flip one of your pieces. I'm going to flip this outer back the other way. So once again, you've got your right sides together. And you're going to line up your pattern pieces and stitch all along this top edge and all along the bottom edge. But yeah, just take a little bit of time, line your seam up in the middle, pop up a couple of pins in, and make sure you've got a nice even edge all the way around. Now, if you want to insert a wire along this top edge, just to help with shaping around the nose, now is the time to do it. Now I'm using, this is just a piece of craft wire. You can use a pipe cleaner. I've seen people using florist's wire. It wants to be something that hopefully isn't going to rust. Now this craft wire is coated with like a black paint, so I don't think this one's going to rust if it's washed. As long as when you take it out of the washing machine, you put it out and let it dry. Don't leave it sitting wet for any length of time. Now I've cut this to 6 inches long, and I'm just going to take a pair of pliers and just fold the end over so I haven't got a sharp point on the end, and that should minimise it from poking through the fabric. And what I'm going to do is stitch it into the seam allowance at the top. Now the pointy end is the nose. So if you look at your pattern, this very pointed, this is the top, and this less angular bit is the base, and it's going to be stitched into this top seam. And I'm just going to pop it into the seam allowance and just pin it. Just pin it in place, ready to stitch. And I'm going to stitch it with a zigzag stitch. So I'm just going to pop a couple of pins in just to hold it. And then on that actual seam allowance, I'm going to use a zigzag stitch to encase that piece of wire. And as you can see there, that zigzag stitch just holds it on the seam. So the thing we need to do now is turn it the right way out. Now, if you don't want to put the wire in, you just go straight to this next step. And through one of these open ends, we're going to turn the whole thing through on itself. once you've turned it the right way round, go back to your ironing board and just press that out nice and flat around the edges. And once that's pressed, you should have something that is starting to actually look like a proper mask shape now. Now, once again, this is something that's purely optional. I've decided to top stitch along the top and bottom seams. One, I just think it helps keep that pressed seam neat and tidy. And also it's just another layer that's encasing that wire in the top. So in case that wire starts to work loose on the inside, if it's top stitched around, it's not going anywhere. It's actually going to be stuck in that channel at the top. And I just thought that was quite a sensible thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and top stitch along the top and bottom. So now this piece of wire is completely encased in the top. That's not going anywhere. And I just think it adds a little bit of a finishing touch. Now, obviously, if you want to use a coordinating thread, go ahead and use one. I didn't have a turquoise, so I'm just using a white thread, but it just makes it a little easier for you to see what I'm doing as well. And the final step that I'm doing here, which is different to the original pattern, is I'm popping some elastic loops in. So I'm going to fold over this raw edge on the end here and stitch it, and then fold it again and stitch it to create a little channel here that I can thread an elastic loop through. And I'm going to do that on both sides. The final thing to do is add in the elastics and just thread them in through these channels that we've stitched. So I've cut two pieces here. These are about 12 inches long. This is a 3mm elastic. Use whatever you can get hold of, whatever you think is comfortable. And if you've got a large needle, you can use that. I haven't got a large needle, so I've just got another piece of wire here that I've just folded in half. Just going to thread that through the channel. Pop the elastic through that loop and pull it back out. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Then we can just tie a knot in. Now, before you tie that too tightly, you can just try this mask on for a fit. You might need to adjust those loops, make them smaller or larger. Once you're happy with where that knot is, you can just make sure it's pulled in nice and tight, trim the ends off, and then just pull it through so that the knot's hidden inside that channel and you haven't got a knot that's going to be irritating you behind your ears. And it just looks really nice and tidy when it's finished. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it's something that you might be interested in doing. I know a lot of countries at the moment you're having to wear masks. From next Friday here in the UK, we have to wear a face covering or a mask when we're indoors in shops. So I know there's a lot of you that are looking to sort of customize and create something a little bit individual. I'm really happy with the subtle colouring. It's got a real nice little shimmer to it, difficult to catch there on the camera, but it's very nice, and it's transformed what would have been a plain fabric into something just a little bit more individual. Please do check out Sweet Red Poppy's channel if you're looking for other patterns for masks. On all of her videos there are links to her website where there are patterns available, and her instructions are really clear. But as always, if you enjoyed this, please leave me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I shall see you again soon. Bye.
I remember the day when we started talking. We were kids and I knocked down all of your mobiles, but you did not seem to mind at all. We took our bikes to the lake after school each day and skated.